And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day when there's a great cabinet meeting going on involving President Trump and his chief advisors and the members of the Trump administration. That cabinet meeting, the AP reports that it comes at a precarious moment for talks aimed at ending the war with Iran, just days after insisting that his administration and Tehran had largely negotiated a settlement, but with negotiations still in a state of flux. In fact, Iran basically denies the White House's optimism about a pending memorandum of understanding. As President Trump prepares to huddle with his top aides, President Trump is projecting confidence that he is closing in on a deal that will open the Strait of Hormuz and provide him a credible argument that Iran's nuclear capability has been diminished enough to declare victory, winding down a conflict that's been politically unpopular for Republicans. But as things stand, Trump also risks finding closure to his war of choice. And CNN is reporting that the White House today pushed back on Iranian state media reports about a draft of the Memorandum of Understanding, calling it a complete fabrication. This report from Iranian-controlled media is not true, and the Memorandum of Understanding they released is a complete fabrication. Nobody should believe what Iranian state media is putting out. Facts matter. So said the White House's Rapid Response account, posted on X. Iranian state media reported that the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, would call for U.S. military forces to withdraw from the vicinity of Iran and to lift the blockade of Iranian ports. Some of the details are similar to the way that U.S. officials have described the emerging deal. American officials have said President Donald Trump would be willing to lift the blockade as long as Iran allows commercial vessels to transit the Strait of Hormuz. And then what about the enriched uranium, which we're supposed to get rid of? That's been one of the major goals of this entire war. As President Trump has said, this is from Olivia Wales, who is a White House spokeswoman, in response to the Iran State TV report. She says, as President Trump has said, negotiations are proceeding nicely. It's a funny word. And what is nice about the war? Well, okay, it's proceeding nicely. And President Trump has made his red lines clear. President Trump will only make a good deal for the American people, which must ensure that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So said Olivia Wales, a White House spokeswoman, in response to the Iran State TV report. And there's already some very good news for President Trump politically. His endorsed candidate won again. He has had a remarkable record with primary candidates that he has endorsed, winning almost everywhere and very consistently. And, of course, no win bigger than what just happened in Texas yesterday, where they had their runoff for the GOP primary election. And the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, defeated the incumbent Senator John Cornyn, a Republican, and one of the most respected and influential Republicans in the Senate. He was viewed as largely untouchable, but now he has lost, and he lost badly. With more than 95% of votes counted, Paxton, who was impeached by the Republican-controlled Texas House of Representatives on corruption and bribery charges just 3 years ago, He won more than 63% of the vote. Paxton had attacked Cornyn for not being sufficiently conservative and cast himself as the candidate most loyal to President Donald Trump. Cornyn unsuccessfully attempted to counter this by posting pictures of himself reading The Art of the Deal and proposing to rename U.S. Highway 288-7 as Trump Interstate. Last week, Trump endorsed Paxton to the dismay of much of the Senate Republican caucus. There is also a draft, this reported by CNN, a new change announced by the Trump administration last week that would require green card seekers, people who do not have permanent residency in the United States yet and who are not citizens yet, but who are trying to do the legal thing, to do the right thing, to apply for green cards. And when President Donald Trump's administration announced last week that it would require green card seekers to first travel back to their home countries, no matter where those countries may be or what bad shape they're in, they are supposed to go back home instead of applying in the U.S. And this is, according to U.S. Immigration Attorney Flavia Santos Lloyd's phone began ringing off the hook with clients worried about the implications for them. This particular immigration attorney, who's quoted by the Associated Press, said she wasn't sure what to tell them, but she knew the confusing new policy would slow down applications. Well, of course, if you have to go home to El Salvador or Venezuela, for that matter, or any place else in the world, if you have to go home to Sweden, it can be complicated. And not to mention any of those difficult places in the world that do not have the kind of civilized government that Sweden does. Lloyd wasn't sure what to tell them, but she knew the confusing new policy would slow down applications. Quote, "It has a chilling effect because we have some cases that we were going to proceed, and I can tell already we should wait and see what's going on," she said. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced on Friday that foreigners in the U.S. who want a green card, who want permanent residency, will need to have to leave the country and apply in their home country, barring some unspecified exceptions. There is also this report from CNN. According to a report on Iranian state television, the memorandum of understanding being negotiated between Iran and the U.S. will call for U.S. military forces to withdraw from Iran's vicinity and lift the blockade of Iranian ports in return for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels. That's what the White House said the report said is not true. So what is going on in this cabinet meeting right now, and what is the message from Ken Paxton's overwhelming victory, almost 2-1, over an incumbent and veteran and respected U.S. Senator? We'll try to tell you what it all means coming up on The Medved Show.
Entertain your brain.
Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Every day on The Michael Medved Show.
And the headline in the New York Times, it's a headline for tomorrow's newspaper, but it says, Cornyn crushed. Well, that has nice alliteration to it. Not if you're a supporter of the established Republican Senator John Cornyn. The headline says, Ken Paxton, the Trump-endorsed and MAGA-backed insurgent, ousted Senator John Cornyn in a runoff yesterday becoming the second primary challenger right after Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, who was basically a very loyal, enthusiastic Trump supporter, just as John Cornyn was. And both senators got voted out. This is two primary challengers knocked out an incumbent Republican senator in less than 2 weeks in what the Times calls a raw display of President Trump's powerful hold on the party base. And everyone had expected, and all the polls had predicted, that this was going to be a very close race. And Paxton didn't spend nearly the amount of money that Cornyn did. Cornyn forces outspent Paxton by a total of $80 million. This is the most expensive primary in American history. Wow. And that primary went to the guy who spent less. A part of what this shows, as many other races have shown, is that the idea that a political race, particularly a political primary, is going to be decided based upon who spends more money. Well, that's not the case here, because in every stage of the campaign, John Cornyn spent a lot more than Ken Paxton. The National Republicans have warned for months, says the New York Times, that Mr. Paxton's scandal-riddled past could put the Republican-held seat in jeopardy. But GOP primary voters proved yesterday that they or a much reviled party establishment. The scope of the defeat was staggering. Mr. Cornyn, once the number 2 Republican in the Senate, he was the Republican Senate whip, and basically a very important figure in the party. But he was out of 254 counties in the state of Texas, big state, 254 counties. How many was Cornyn losing in? All 254. Unbelievable. The actual, with 98.9% of the votes counted, it's Paxton 64%, Cornyn just 36%. And it's an indication of Trump's enormous influence and dominant role in the Republican Party. In fact, there's a Frank Luntz, the veteran and much respected pollster and political analyst who has been an architect of Republican successes for years. He put up on his Truth Social, on his actually X account, there is zero doubt tonight that Donald Trump is in complete and total control of the Republican Party. He can beat just about any Republican in just about any state, in just about any primary. He is chief strategist, chief advocate, and chief voice of the GOP. His name may not be on the ballot in November, but make no mistake, nothing and no one will have a bigger impact on voter behavior. And what he means is both positively and negatively. This is going to be a vote either for or against Donald Trump when people are voting for Republicans or Democrats. That's certainly true where both candidates here were trying desperately to be the most pro-Trump candidate. But because Senator Cornyn did not immediately back Donald Trump for his second term, he thought it was time for the party to move on to new leadership. He was leaning toward Ron DeSantis. That is why President Trump, after much hesitation, ended up endorsing Paxton instead of Cornyn. It says in the New York Times, an ugly GOP primary could take time to heal. it is an understatement to say that the race between Mr. Cornyn and Mr. Paxton has left wounds that in the party that won't heal soon. Even in the final hours on Tuesday, Mr. Cornyn was attacking Paxton, telling CNN that he was an embarrassment and bringing up his wife's accusations of marital infidelity. She's a state senator, his wife, who is now separated from him, and said that someone of his who has committed biblical immorality, as she puts it, should not be elevated to the U.S. Senate. You can't trust Ken Paxton, Mr. Cornyn said bluntly, creating the kind of soundbite the Democrats could use this fall. And for the Democrats, they have the candidate Tallarico, who has been outpacing just about every other Democrat in the country in fundraising, even before his matchup with Mr. Paxton was set. Tallarico raised $27 million in the first quarter. No Republican running for the Senate in any state raised more than $4 million for his or her main campaign account. So Mr. Cornyn has been one of the Republican Party's best fundraisers. Mr. Paxton has not. As a result, party leaders in Washington have said that Mr. Paxton's nomination could force donors to divert as much as $100 million to try to save the seat from the Democrats. Senate officials are hoping Mr. Trump and his $350 million super PAC decide to pony up. Notably, the main Senate Republican super PAC left Texas entirely out of its fall ad reservations. Coming up, we'll talk about Fox News on the Trump effect. The president with his endorsements in the GOP primaries and what those endorsements mean. We will be right back on the Medved Show.
Amazon presents Jeff versus Taco Truck Salsa. Whether it's Verde, Roja, or the orange one. For Jeff, trying any salsa is like playing Russian roulette with a flamethrower. Luckily, Jeff saved with Amazon and stocked up on antacids, ginger tea, and milk. Habanero? More like habanero, yes. Save the everyday with Amazon.
And the question is, what else was going on in Texas, and what was the real message that Texas voters sent, Republican voters, who were part of this primary that was a gigantic victory for President Trump? And there was another election in Texas where there's actually a Democratic candidate who was favored to win a nomination for a House seat. And her name is Maureen Galindo. And she was very outspoken in the campaign in terms of wanting to put me in jail. Yes, me and actually my entire family. Okay, so what happened with Maureen Galindo? We will get to that. First of all, the Trump effect. Fox News had something to say about the president's standing within his own party. This is clip 18.
You want to win and you're Republican. You want the president's endorsement. Look at this board here, Trace. Governor, House, Senate, undefeated if you're the president. And it gets even better because you see this says 8 for 8. Let me do this for you. 9 for 9. The president is still undefeated. Why, you ask? Well, you actually made mention of it here, Trace, and let me take it to the great state of Texas. You know, I love the Lone Star State, and that's where we want to take you because Ken Paxton, what a win over John Cornyn. That is massive. Not only a 27.8 victory, look at the vote total. 337,000. Now, just for a little perspective, let me show you this. It wasn't that long ago. You'll remember that it was 41-40. Cornyn over Paxton just a few weeks ago. Wesley Hunt, 292,000 votes. Well, as it turns out, that, my friend, pretty much ends up being the margin of victory for Ken Paxton. So he wins, and that is a massive knockout.
Okay, massive knockout, and great. He wins, but he wins and faces a fairly formidable Democrat who is trying to create a situation where he is the first Democrat to win a statewide election in the state of Texas in a generation. And James Tallarico is described often as smooth-talking, a smooth-talking seminarian. He is also a state legislator, and he's an effective candidate. And last night on MS Now, Tallarico, who's already won the Democratic nomination, tried to contrast himself very forcibly and directly to his now nominated Republican opponent, Ken Paxton. Here's what Tallarico had to say, clip 13.
Ken Paxton is clipping comments, taking them out of context to try to paint a picture, trying to paint me as someone I'm not. You know, Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record over 4 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where I've brought Democrats and Republicans together to pass more than 60 bipartisan bills to cut property taxes, to raise teacher pay, to lower the cost of housing, prescription drugs, and childcare across Texas. And I'm going to put that record up against Ken Paxton's criminal record any day of the week, twice on Sunday. I've called out the extremes in both parties, on the right and the left. You know, I've called out Ken Paxton for his blatant illegal corruption, but I also called out President Biden when he failed to secure our southern border. So I'm not interested in going to Washington, D.C. to serve one political party. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to serve the people of Texas.
Okay, that's James Tallarico, the Republican, the Democratic hope of unseating this crucial Republican Senate seat. There are 4 seats that the Democrats need to win in order to take over the U.S. Senate. And they are leading in places like Maine and Alaska, Ohio, and if they add Texas to that list, it's a very formidable possibility that Democrats could flip control of the U.S. Senate. Here was James Tallarico, again, on MS Now, speaking specifically about what he referred to as Ken Paxton's criminal record. This is clip 20.
Paxton embodies the broken political system that we're running against. He is the most corrupt politician in America. 3 years ago tomorrow, he was impeached by his own party for using his public office, his position of public trust, to enrich himself and his donors at our expense. And that is exactly the problem in our politics. It's puppet politicians who serve themselves and their billionaire mega donors instead of serving us. It's why we can't afford anything. It's why we can't get ahead no matter how hard we work. The system is rigged by corrupt politicians like Ken Paxton. And so it's going to be all of us. It's going to be Democrats, independents, and Republicans. It's going to be urban Texans, rural Texans, suburban Texans. It's going to be all of us coming together, the people versus Ken Paxton.
And what does Ken Paxton have to say? He had a jubilant victory celebration in Plano, Texas, and he talked about the scope and the impact of his overwhelming victory yesterday. This is the victorious Ken Paxton, clip 19.
I feel speechless in a way, but they're not going to let me do that. Wow. To the people in this room, to the people watching at home, and to the people of the great state of Texas, tonight, we just made history. I want to thank my family, my kids, my grandchildren, the Paxton Patriots, and every single person here today Without your love, your support, and your prayers, we would not be here tonight celebrating this incredible victory. I'd also like to thank Scott Pressler and Turning Point Action for their endorsements. And then there's one person who I think you might know, President Donald J. Trump.
Yes, there is no question that he wrapped himself as close as he possibly could to Trump as a source of strength on winning this election. Meanwhile, there's a headline in the Washington Post which is guaranteed to get your attention, and it's a pretty amazing headline. The headline is Texas Democrats reject House candidate who called for imprisoning Zionists. Democratic voters in a Texas runoff election yesterday, on Tuesday, nominated a sheriff's office spokesperson for a key House seat and rejected a left-wing activist who espoused castrating and imprisoning American Zionists. Now, this is personal. I'm proud to be an American Zionist, and probably a majority of American Zionists are actually not Jewish. They're Christians who are very much in favor of Israel and for Israel's role in biblical prophecy, if you want, but for whatever reason. But the idea that she would want to imprison and castrate people because of a political position they take. Johnny Garcia is the victorious candidate. He defeated Maureen Galindo, who is a sex therapist with a little political experience. Garcia led Galindo by almost 20 percentage points when the race was called by the Associated Press. So what was the key message of this particular race, also in Texas? We will get to that and to more. Plus, Stephen Miller comes up with a way to close the federal deficit. So, unfortunately, it doesn't work, but we'll get to it. Coming up on the Medved Show.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Here's a little tune to help you remember. Same drive, different day. Don't you wish you were getting away? Pack your bags and come on through. Texas, Ohio, Alaska, we're up there too. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Well, I hope you like my little song. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
And on the Medved Show, just talking about the amazing example, we had spoken about it last week, of Maureen Galindo, who in the first stage of the Democratic primary in her congressional district in Texas, she won. She won very narrowly over Johnny Garcia, who is the candidate and somebody who worked with the sheriff's department in his home in Texas. But she had gotten national attention and gotten a lot of national money, Maureen Galindo, for suggesting that she would introduce a bill that would declare anyone who was a Zionist declare them to be anti-Semitic. Now, again, what does it mean to be a Zionist? You can look it up in any dictionary or encyclopedia. Being a Zionist means you believe that the Jewish people have a right to their own country, that this is not a radical notion or a dangerous notion, but for her, she wanted to pass a bill, if she were elected to Congress, that would redefine Zionist into something that was illegal and that was by definition anti-Semitic, because her claim is that the Arabs who are the victims of genocide, they are also real Semites, and American Jews aren't real Semites, and American Zionists are worst of all. And Democratic leaders, thank God, had denounced Galindo, saying she would have embarrassed the party nationally and probably would have had a tougher time winning in a general election in a district drawn to give Republicans an edge. It's one of those new districts in Texas that the Republicans in the Lone Star State had put together. The chaotic race prompted a closer look at campaign spending as Democratic leaders accused Republicans of using a shadowy political action committee to prop up Galindo with a flood of advertising. To counteract that, Democrats spent last-minute money trying to defeat her. The Democratic Congressional Committee launched an ad over the weekend calling Galindo MAGA Maureen, which is an insult, of course, to the MAGA movement more than it is to Maureen Galindo. The Blue Dog Action PAC, a super PAC allied with the moderate Blue Dog Coalition, spent $950,000 on the runoff, airing ads describing Galindo's support as a Republican scam. And there is some reason to believe that there was Republican money going to Galindo, not because the Republicans want to imprison all Zionists, most of whom are probably voting, or not most of whom, many of whom, of course, vote Republican. And in March, they had the original first stage of the primary, and Galindo was the top vote getter among four candidates in the district's Democratic primary. She received 29% of the vote. Johnny Garcia, who ultimately beat her and beat her soundly, though she won by a small margin in the first stage, her primary performance surprised many Democrats. She ran as a fiery anti-establishment candidate. In a May 13th Instagram post, Galindo wrote that if she were elected to Congress, she would pen a bill declaring all Zionism anti-Semitic and would turn a local U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement Center into a facility to imprison all American Zionists. She also criticized Garcia for taking money from pro-Israel groups. Garcia's campaign vastly outraised her, according to federal election records. Galindo since said that she is not anti-Semitic, oh no, and she claimed that a local journalist had twisted her words. Well, how did he do that if she had an Instagram post to make clear her desire to imprison Zionists? Meanwhile, there was also a loss for another unsavory character. There's a veteran congressman named Al Green. You'd know him if you saw him because he's one of those people who, in his first term and in his second term, has led the movement, such as it was, to impeach President Trump. He was the first person to start talking about impeaching Trump. And President Trump, as you knew he would, when Al Green lost his seat in Congress in the landslide, which was yesterday, he posted on his Truth Social, "Congratulations to the Democrat Party." He's now very thrilled with this new nickname, Democrat. Okay? Congratulations to the Democrat Party, exclamation point. Al Green, one of the most mentally deficient congressmen in the history of our country, has lost in a landslide his seat in Congress. But I will miss that lunatic not screaming and violently waving his cane at me during my next State of the Union speech. Make America great again. God bless America, 3 exclamation points. President DJT. It's not just President Trump, but it's basically all Republicans who probably will not feel a great deal of regret or uncertainty about the benefit to them of Al Green losing his primary election and any chance of holding a seat in Congress. He's gone. Meanwhile, Scott Jennings was on CNN talking about how if there's not a candidate that Trump already likes and loves and considers a loyalist and a true follower, he will will one into existence. How does that work? Here's Scott Jennings on CNN.
Well, look, the president, as all presidents are, is the political head of his party, and his opinion matters a lot. When Barack Obama was the president, when George W. Bush was the president, when Bill Clinton was the president, all of these people had enormous influence over what the people in the party were going to do top to bottom. Trump, I would argue, of all of those people, is probably the strongest party boss of the modern political era. If he wants you to be the nominee of your party, he can will it into existence. But you have to understand, his agenda is what Republican voters, and especially Republican primary voters, it's what they've endorsed, it's what they voted for. They trust his judgment. And if he says, I think candidate A is better to enact that agenda than candidate B, they follow along, not because it's a personality contest, because they voted for a particular agenda out of this president, and they want him to have the best possible team based on his judgment to enact that agenda. It happened in Kentucky with Massey. That was the issue there. They thought he'd gotten off the team. It's what happened in Texas. They believed that Paxton would fight harder for the agenda in Cornyn. That's basically the underlying issue in all these primaries. Okay,
the underlying issue is, in other words, loyalty. And loyalty not to an ideology in particular, because there's an unclear what exactly is, particularly on issues like the Iran war. What does the ideology of peace through strength, which was always Ronald Reagan's motto, what does that have to do with why we are fighting in Iran and where's that going? That became a huge subject in the cabinet meeting. And coming up, we'll play you some highlights and, yes, lowlights of President Trump speaking to his cabinet and the cabinet speaking back to President Trump. How do you think they spoke? Do you think they were admiring or critical? Well, just to eliminate any danger of surprise, maybe you can focus on what Trump is likely to say and where we are likely to go next with Iran. That and more coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.
Here's a special discount, 50% off just for being a MedHead annual member. Join today at michaelmedved.com.